What's up everyone, I am Don951, bringing to you chapter 19 of my Fire Emblem 12 Maniac Mode 0% Gross playthrough. I'm going solo today because even though this is the longest chapter in the post-warp section of the game, this is still fairly short and action-packed, and I wanted to make sure that there was enough time for me to cover everything that I wanted to touch on. So this chapter reuses the same map as chapter 11 of Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, and it can be trivialized in much the same way. You start out in a position where a Draco Knight can easily fly across a mountain range on turn 1, kill the enemy boss, freeing up the gate for Marth to be warped to and to seize. And this reminds me of chapter 18 of Fire Emblem 5, which contains the Xavier recruitment. You can trivialize that map in a similar way by warping a boss killer, warping Leaf, and ending the chapter on turn 1, but it seems like that chapter was designed around recruiting Xavier, and I can say that this chapter seems to be designed around recruiting the Wolf Guard. This was not present in the original version of this chapter in FE3 Book 2, where most of the Wolf Guard simply did not exist, and you can only recruit Roche in the village. But I would say that even though this compromises the narrative integrity a little bit, it does introduce a lot of complexity and a little bit of frustration to this chapter. I will consider this recruitment to be the second most difficult in the Fire Emblem franchise, behind only Xavier, and this is for a few reasons. The first is that all the recruitable characters start in a different part of the map. You get Roche by visiting the bottom right village, but after that he has to talk to Violent, who starts in the bottom left corner of the map. Then Violent has to talk to Sedgar, who starts in the top right corner of the chapter, and then Sedgar finally has to talk to Wolf, who starts near the gate, in the top left corner of the map. So nominally you have to lug these pretty terrible units around the entire map, avoid exposing them to enemies. And because they're so weak, you also have to avoid accidentally killing them while they're still enemies. And once you recruit them, you have to make sure that the cohorts that they started out around are taken care of, because otherwise they'll just get destroyed by them. So I wouldn't blame anyone for giving up on this recruitment, especially on their first playthrough of this game. We start the party off by baiting over Wolf with Palla, and we do this because Wolf normally only attacks units that are within his range, but after he does this once, his AI changes, and he can move every single turn, whether or not there are any units in his range. We do this to bring him and Sedgar closer together while they are still enemies, and this enables us to avoid using Warp or Rescue on Sedgar after we recruit him to bring him closer to Wolf. We must delay Marth visiting the village until turn 2 in order to give some time for this to happen, and also to clear out the starting area a little bit. After Marth visits the village and recruits Roche, he and Roche have to be instantly rescued to safety, otherwise they will be destroyed by the enemies that are nearby. Visiting the village sets a few events into motion. It causes Violent and some enemy paladins to reinforce on the subsequent enemy phase, but also 2 turns from now, it causes a larger wave of enemy reinforcements to appear. This includes 8 reinforcements from the forts around the gate, and on Lunatic mode and higher at least, it also includes Draco Knights from 3 corners of the map. Now, I don't know if these Draco Knights appear on Maniac mode, but honestly I didn't care to stick around long enough to find out. And the point is that after you visit the village, you only have a couple of turns to get everything else done in this chapter, otherwise you're totally screwed. Turn 2 enemy phase has Zane doing his part to move Sedgar closer to Wolf, and this is much more dangerous and complicated compared to before, because Zane is in range of a ton of enemies. He's in range of Sedgar, 5 other horsemen, and 2 ballisticians which have pachyderm and do a ton of damage, so we have to engage in some AI manipulation to make sure that Zane survives his enemy phase. We have Belf bait the ballistician on the right pretty easily, and we're also able to bait a horseman away with Palla, who no longer has the Ios shield, but this makes her take a large chunk of damage, and she would normally be KO'd by this and a ballistician, but we were able to divert him beforehand with Roche. And the way the enemy attack order works in this game, the ballisticians almost always move to attack before the horsemen, thus rendering everyone safe. On turn 3, all of our setup pays off. Roche can recruit Violent, who in turn is warped next to Sedgar in order to recruit him, and after that, Sedgar and Wolf are close enough such that they can finish the recruitment without any further intervention on our part. Before we finish this chapter, there's still a few odds and ends to tie up, mostly involving droppable items in order to help pad our funds. One of these is a Silver Axe dropped by a warrior that we baited over with Minerva on the previous enemy phase. This guy normally doubles Minerva unless she has a Rainbow Potion, just to give an idea of how tough the enemies are by this point in the game, but we're able to snipe him from range with Levensword Katarina, who after all the Spirit Dust and the Speed Wings can muster a similar level of offense to Palla, thus showing that Levensword Swordmasters are definitely a force to be reckoned with in this game. There's also an enemy thief that has a droppable Silver Sword. Normally this guy goes for the village, but because we visited it so early, he decides to run away instead, but we can pick him off with Belf and Leiden. And finally, there's a bishop with a men's staff on the left-hand side of this map. We no longer have any flyers that can double him, so we have to resort to a critical hit, and who better do this than our girl Catria, who's been on the bench for so long. We had to warp Marth to kind of a weird spot, but this allows him to give a full support boost and a Geosphere crit boost to Catria for the kill, and he's still in range of seizing the gate as long as we pick off a couple of generals with the Thwomp. So that's chapter 19, finished in 3 turns, and at the end of this chapter, Boa, on the verge of death and unable to help us, gives us his tome and staff, while Marth presses F to pay respects for the fallen hero Shadow Dragon. See you next time!